Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kim and this is Expedition 3 Pages. Today I'm going to be chatting about what I read in February, what kind of challenges they fulfilled, if they did, and then I'm going to look forward to February and work out what I need to do for my challenges in February. Challenges, readathons, and readalongs. Let's start with the first book that I finished in January, and that was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I definitely started the year out strong with this one. I gave this one 4.5 stars and really enjoyed it. This book follows Addie LaRue, who has grown up in rural France in the very late kind of 1600s, early 1700s. And she was a very carefree child. She was very adventurous. She had absolutely no plans to settle down and marry. She aspires to be like the witch in the village and live a very independent life. But when she reaches early adulthood, she's kind of forced into this arranged marriage and she freaks out. She panics. She doesn't want to do it. So she prays and prays and prays to all the gods that please help her, please help her. And then one time she prays after dark and the wrong kind of God answers. She prays to him for freedom and he gives her freedom. However, it comes at the cost of nobody ever remembering who she is once she has met them. So that includes everybody that she's grown up with, her mother and father. Nobody remembers who she is anymore. And she can live forever. She has immortal life, but nobody will ever remember her at all. So it's a really severe case of people forgetting you as well. It's not like, oh, they remember you for a couple of hours after you've left them, or they remember you for a day. It's literally, she'll knock on the door, they open it, they say, oh, who are you? They close the door, they open it again instantly. Oh, hello, who are you? Like, as soon as she's out of sight, out of mind, basically. And I found it absolutely terrifying to think about as a concept, like, no one ever remembering you ever again. And of course, she was born in the late 1600s. So as a woman at that time in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, whatever, it was very difficult for women to get about independently, let alone when no one's ever going to remember who you are, like you're just essentially on your own. And I think that V. Schwab did a really good job taking her time to explore what that actually meant for Addie. And even though it was limited in its scope just because it's such a huge thing that could happen, so I would say that there were some moments where you could really question it and be like, hang on, but what about this? What about this? What about this? But that kind of adds to the fun of it as well, I think, just kind of trying to find flaws in the story, just of where it falls down. But I think on the whole, she did a really good job. And I would say for the first maybe 200 odd pages of this book, you are just taking your time to explore this world with Addie and explore her experiences. So it starts in modern day, which I think in this book is 2014, and then jumps back and forth from the beginning of her life, like through. So yeah, you're learning about her past experiences as well as her current experience of living in the 21st century and learning like all the coping mechanisms that she's kind of created to deal with her situation. And also you kind of learn about why she's still in that situation and why she hasn't given up yet. And yeah, I would say it takes a really long time for the actual story to start. And when the actual story starts, there is a mystery and it gets really quite interesting. You just kind of want to know what's happening. But I did enjoy the actual build up to that and just kind of sitting in the moment of, or like just exploring how she went about dealing with her situation, which was really awful and scary. Like when you really think about it, you're completely alone. How do you find enjoyment in a world where you're completely alone? You know, that kind of thing. And it's funny because when I was reading it, I would say I wouldn't make the same choices as Addie if I was her. If I had like immortal time. I found it really interesting to think about. I think it was well written. I enjoyed the writing style. I think with this book it could have been written in a way that was a lot more detailed and maybe a bit more serious than it was, but I think for what it was and the storyline that it was and how it played out, I think it was just done really well, and I found it really interesting to think about. And yeah, I would recommend it. I think, well, I really enjoyed The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, and I feel like this book gave me the same wonder as that book gave me. When I was reading it, I felt really I just really enjoyed the reading experience. And the other book that kind of gave me a similar feeling was Piranesi by Suzanne Clark, is it? So I feel like if you're someone who did enjoy those other two books, then you may enjoy this one as well, because for me it gave me the same feelings that those books did. But yes, I thoroughly enjoyed it. 4.5 stars. The edition that I have is wonderful. It's illustrated. It's got really nice end pages, and there's some illustrations in the center as well, which were done by lots of different artists, so it's not the same artist over and over again. This was my favourite picture here of Addie. I really like that illustration, it's good. So in terms of challenges, read-alongs, readathons, that kind of stuff, this book I used for Buzzwordathon, because Buzzwordathon in January was Life or Death, and this is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I also took part in the Whodunit Readathon, which was run by Danielle from Bookara, Paige from Pages with Paige, and Naomi from Naomi's Bookshelf. And they had set up a Cluedo readathon. So Invisible Life of Addie LaRue I used for Mrs. White and Dr. Orchid, because there is a white cover and it has flowers on it. So that fitted for that. Then I didn't have a room for it, because you could use one book for a character, a room, and a weapon. But yeah, I used a different book for the room. But for the weapon, I chose, well, I was torn between either Candlestick, because, well, candlesticks shine and it's kind of shiny. But also, as I've said, it is kind of a slow burn book. And I felt like the vibe of the book was very Candlestick. Addie also has freckles in like the shape of a constellation across her face, which everyone comments on all the time. Oh, you got stars on your face, and stars shine like candles. So yeah, maybe Candlestick is the best one to go with. The other weapon I was going to go with was Lead Pipe, because it's a heavy book and it's over 500 pages. And if you really wanted to, you could probably bash someone with this in place of a lead pipe. So happy thoughts, happy days. Yeah, so I used this book for those prompts. Okay, so book number 2 that I finished in January was The Satsuma Complex by Bob Mortimer. And this is, I never know what people mean when they say a book is a cozy mystery, but I feel like this may be a cozy mystery. It was a mystery and it felt very cozy, so I think that fits the bill. But yeah, I absolutely love this cover. I do love it. I read it and I also listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Bob himself and also Sally Phillips, who is also a British comedian. So they're both British comedians, and I think both of them did a really great job at the narration, and I would say it's well worth listening to over reading the book. Bob Mortimer is a character comedian, and he really does put a lot in all the different characters in the book when he's reading them, which, yeah, made it really, really enjoyable. And when I was listening to it, I was commuting and I was laughing on the train all the time, probably like annoying everybody, but it was just really funny. Yeah, so in this book, you're following Gary, who I think is in his 30s. I can't actually remember now, but he's like this kind of, he's not quite a lawyer, but he works at a lawyer firm. And he's a pretty lonely guy. He lives on his own. He's had failed relationships in the past. Yeah, so he's pretty lonely. He does have a friendship with his next door neighbour, which is this older lady called Grace, who has a dog called LaRue, which, yeah, I loved Grace and LaRue. And yeah, basically Gary, he ends up going to the pub with this friend, acquaintance at work, who he thinks is trying to be his friend. And then this friend goes missing and you have to find out what happened to him. The same night that he was at the pub with his friend before his friend went missing, he meets a girl who he calls Satsuma because she has a book at the time called The Satsuma Complex that she's reading. And Sally Phillips narrates the book as Satsuma. So yeah, you do find out more about Satsuma from her perspective and who she is and what's happened to her and stuff. And I would say, even though this book is really funny and it's just kind of silly, and Gary is one of these characters where he's just really random. Like, he's very Bob. If you know Bob Mortimer, he's very Bob. He has his kind of humour. He thinks in a really abstract way. Like, and what I mean by that is, what made me laugh so much about this book is that he would pick up on things that I would never even think about people or situations and places that he's in. He also has this little squirrel mate that when he sees a squirrel in a park, I would like to think it's the same squirrel, but maybe it's any squirrel. He like uses the squirrel as like a counselor to himself, so he will talk to himself in his head, but he's answering as the squirrel. That was brilliant. Comic genius. Loved the squirrel. Loved his voice for the squirrel as well. And also, whenever they had a chat, it was always what you wanted to say to him. So that was quite satisfying to read. And yeah, overall, I thought it was a pretty simple story, but actually had quite dark themes, like underlying the storylines. And there was a lot to think about while you were reading it, actually. And a lot of the situations were actually quite dark at the heart of everything, even though it was quite a light-hearted book. I thought it was well-paced, and I just had a nice time with it. And I ended up giving it, I think, 3.75 stars. I didn't think it was quite a 4-star, but I really enjoyed it, so I didn't want to give it 3.5, so I went 3.75, which I don't think I've ever done before, but yeah. That's what I gave to this one. I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely read more from him. I think this is Bob's first novel. He's written autobiographies, I think, and memoirs and stuff, but this is his first novel, and I really enjoyed it. It was good. I recommend, especially if you like Bob Mortimer, listen to it. It's well worth it. So, challenges. This one I used for Amy from A-Star Reads viewer prompt from her TBR game. So the viewer prompt was family pick, and then Spencer chose this for me. Spencer's my partner, and he loves Bob Mortimer, so he wanted me to read this, which is really nice because then we could chat about it as I was reading it. He was just finishing it as I was starting it, so that was nice. So I read that for Amy's viewer prompt for January. For the Whodunit Readathon, I used it for Professor Plum because there was fruit on the cover, and plum is a fruit, and a Satsuma is a fruit. Also, purple is kind of purpley. Blue more, but a bit of purple. For the weapon, I used it for revolver because there is a gun in the book. For the room, I used it for the library because it's about a book. It's called the name of a book that's in the book. Did that make any sense? In this story, there's a book called The Satsuma Complex, and the book's called The Satsuma Complex, so it's about a book in a book. So yeah, I managed to use it for the maximum amount of prompts that it could be used for the Whodunit Readathon, which was great. The third book I finished in January was The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which is the first book off my 40 by 40 list that I have read, which was great. I was supposed to read this month either Pride and Prejudice or The Other Bennet Sister, both of which were pretty big, and I was just running out of time, so I chose the smallest one. I think one of the smallest ones, if not the smallest one on that list to read. I love these editions. I love the front covers of most of them. The spines are not the best, in my opinion. I don't like the stripes of different colours, but anyway. But to hold, it's floppy. It's just really great to hold. And I'm actually reading another book in this edition at the moment, and I'm really enjoying the reading experience of the book holding situation. So yeah, I think in the future with classics, I think I'm going to try and get these when I can. Anyway, I'm not going to talk too much about my thoughts on this one because I did film a separate video for that, which is hopefully coming out next week. So yeah, you'll hear my thoughts about everything there, but I did really enjoy my reading experience of this, even though I do have criticisms of it, and I think I gave it 4 stars in the end. For this one, I only used it for the Whodunit Readathon, and I used it for Reverend Green because it's got a green cover. I used it for The Weapon of Wrench because it's about an inventor and he built his time machine, so I'm sure he used a wrench at some point. And I also used it for Dining Room because this kind of takes place in, well, they're not always in a dining room, but at some point they do sit down for a meal while the time traveller is talking to them about his adventures and stuff, so they must be in the dining room for that bit. So I used it for Dining Room as well. The very last book that I read in January was Self-Help for Your Nerves by Dr. Claire Weeks. This is a self-help book which is learn to relax and enjoy life again by overcoming stress and fear, which I've had on my shelf for a really long time, and I thought it was about time to read it, even though I don't feel anywhere near as anxious as I have done in the past. This was a really interesting read because it was written back in the 60s, and I feel like I haven't really read many modern self-help books, but I feel like she was very pragmatic and she was very to the point and kind of no nonsense, like this is what you have to do to help yourself. if you don't do this, you're kind of cheating yourself, basically. Stop making excuses. It wasn't quite that harsh, but it did feel like it was very like, you got to do something about it yourself. You know, there's only so much other people can do for you. However, do lean on people if you need to lean on them, and don't be afraid to do that. So when people say to you, just pull yourself together, get on with it, what are you doing? You know, don't take that from someone, because sometimes your mind is just so tired and broken down from stress and anxiety that you physically can't help yourself, and you do need a crutch. And she kind of talks about all of that kind of thing. Let me just have a little glance at the content. So it's very much like discussing the nervous illness, the nervous system, telling you about the physicality of the body and all of that. Then it's kind of talking about nervous illness that's come because of maybe you've done something you feel guilty about, that something has happened and you've got a lot of grief in your life, or you've just got a problem you don't know how to solve. And she goes into specific detail on ways you can handle that. She gives advice to friends and family of someone who's having a nervous breakdown, or has had a nervous breakdown, is coming out of it. And I thought it was really good, actually. I thought there was quite a lot of good advice in here. There was a lot of medical talk that I don't know how much it stands to today. Although, to be fair, if she said in here, you probably need a sedative at this point to help you, she always said, go to the doctor first. Never just take sedatives off your own back. Like, actually get medical advice beforehand. Yeah, it does read dated in places. However, I do like the way she is very pragmatic and very to the point. And sometimes I do feel like you just need to be told, you've got to sort this out and help yourself. Lean on someone if you need to, but you've got to do something to start helping yourself. And I found that quite useful. She uses the he, him pronouns quite a lot all the way through, which is just a practice that was done back then. But it was quite jarring, actually, to read. And it made me laugh because it was like talking about people generically. He does this, and then when he goes to work, and he does that, and he does this. And then her example will be about a woman that's come to her for help. So it just was like quite jarring to read about, especially from a 21st century perspective. But you kind of got used to that in the end, and that's just of its time, whatever. With regards to challenges, I used this for Whitney from TBR's Den's Genre-a-thon. And for the month of January, it was self-help or teaches you something new. So it literally says self-help in the title. So that's what I used this one for. And then for Who Done It-a-thon, I used it for the study because it's non-fiction. So I used it for my extra room that I was missing. And so this kind of got me all my prompts that I needed for Who Done It-a-thon, and I was able to find out who did it, where it was, and what the weapon was. So I was very pleased with myself about that. So yeah, success for the readathon in January. I never have success for stuff like that. So happy days. And thank you to the ladies who organised that. It was a lot of fun. So there was one reading challenge that I had planned to fulfil that I didn't fulfil in the month of January, and that was A Year in Aldea, which is run by G from Book Roast. And the prompt for that was to start a series. Technically, I did start a series. However, I did not finish the book yet. But I will still be doing that challenge. I will just be walking slowly through the adventure path. So the book that I started reading for that was The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, and I'm currently on page, where am I? 188. So I'm like, got this much left basically. And I nearly rushed it at the end of January, and I thought, no, don't do that because I won't remember anything. And I'm reading this for the Catch Up Book Club run by Becca from Becca and the Books. And the live show for this isn't until March. So what I didn't want to do was rush it through in the last week of January and then forget everything. So yeah, I am enjoying this though. It is pretty violent, as I was expecting, but not as violent as I was expecting. I was expecting it to be violent, and it is, but not as bad as I imagined, is what I'm trying to say. For the most part, I'm really enjoying this. I'm really interested in the characters and what's happening, and I'm enjoying all the characters. There are some things that I'm struggling with, like the very lads vibe of some of the chapters. And also there's a female character in here that's very much like, she's not like other women, which I don't really like. But on the whole, I'm enjoying this, so I'm looking forward to continuing. And only when I finish this book will I then move on to the next prompt on the Year of Aldea list, basically. So, reading challenges for February. Genreathon is poetry for the month, and Buzzwordathon is verbs. I kept forgetting what a verb is. I think I've got it down now, so I apologise if I'm being really dumb here, but I think this covers both of these things. So I have this poetry book here by Abdurrahman A. Waberi, and it's called The Nomads, My Brothers Go Out to Drink from the Big Dipper. So to drink is a verb, right? And yeah, this is a poetry book that I'm reading as part of my Reading Around the World challenge, which for this round is in Djibouti. Yeah, so I'm going to be using this hopefully for both Genreathon poetry and Buzzwordathon verbs. Next up we have Amy from A Star Reads viewer prompt, and this Amy messaged me to say that it's adult fantasy with purple on the cover. I have nothing like that, not one thing. Well, I have the second book in the N.K. Jemisin series, the Broken Earth trilogy. I haven't even read the first book, and I've got so many chunky books on my TBR for February that I'm like, no, I cannot read 2 books to get to that purple adult fantasy. So I don't know what I'm going to do, if anybody has any suggestions of one, because when I looked it up very briefly just before filming, there was a lot of YA that had a purple cover that were fantasy, but not adult fantasy that I could clearly see. So I feel like I have to do some digging for that. Or when Amy releases her video after I'm filming this, then I will be able to maybe see some suggestions, hopefully, she's got. I do have a purple book that's on my 40 by 40 list, and that's Sula by Toni Morrison. So if all else fails, I will just do the purple bit and not the adult fantasy bit, which is a shame, but I do really want to read this. It's on my 40 by 40, so it would be good to get to this one. Then we've got Year in Aldea, and after I finish old Joe Abercrombie, what I was hoping to do was go, so there's 2 choices after I finish this one. I can either read a book with trees on the cover for going through a forest, or I can read a book with water on a cover to go via the lake, I think. I may have invented that, but yeah, it's water on the cover is one of the prompts. And the one I wanted to read next is The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel, which is also a book on my 40 by 40 list. It's got water on the cover. I was also hoping that I might read this for a readathon that I want to do in February, which I'll talk about in a sec. The time that I want to read it for that readathon, I think, is going to come before finishing this one. So I may have to pick a different book for Year in Aldea after all. But I did initially want to read this one. So the readathon that I'm taking part in February is Polathon, which is run by Jade from Jadey Ray Reads. And Jade has created a spinner wheel, which I'll put the image up here. The readathon starts on the 6th of February, and what I'm planning on doing is spinning the wheel, finding out the first prompt, picking a book, and going from there. I did do a preemptive spin, but I might just spin on the day and just start again and not plan anything beforehand. But the spin that I did initially gave me cold cover, and I was going to use The Glass Hotel for that. But yeah, I'm not going to finish my other book in time to read it for A Year in Aldea, so I don't know what I'm going to do about this. Yeah, and that's everything that I'm kind of planning in February. I have a huge TBR in February though. What have I got on here? So books I'm still in the middle of. I'm currently reading North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is the other book that I'm reading in this Penguin English Library edition, and yeah, loving it. Floppy. It's great. Love this cover. Really like the cover, and I'm really enjoying this book. I'm currently on page 249, and it's about the divide between North and kind of about the divide between the North and South of the UK, of England specifically. It's about a family that's just moved up north, and it's also about the strikes that are taking place up there. And yeah, it's kind of hitting harder than I think it usually would, because there's lots of strikes going on in the UK at the moment. So I'm feeling quite stressed about that, I guess. And then reading about this, at the moment you are seeing it from both sides, which is, I don't know, it's difficult to read because you kind of feel like, oh gosh, like nothing changes. This was written in the middle 1800s. I think, what year was it written? This was released mid 1800s, so it came out, yeah, It was serialized first, actually, in household words in 1854 to 1855. So yeah, right in the middle of the 1800s. I'm enjoying it. It's good. I'll talk about it when I'm done, basically. The other book that I'm in the middle of is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, which I'm buddy reading with Amy from A-Star Reads. We're on another little bit of a halt at the moment, but I'm really enjoying it. We finished part 3 in January, so now we're on to part 4 on page 418, and really enjoying this one. The last couple of chapters were kind of sad, so yeah, I can't talk to you about it because it's 400 pages in, but I am still really enjoying this one, and we'll get to the end eventually, but there's no need to rush. Why rush? There's books on my TBR for February that I'm planning on reading for my Tales from Two Trails TBR game that I play every single month. I played it in mid-Jan. If you missed it, I'll link the video down below. So I'm not doing one for the start of February, so we've had 6 weeks to try and fulfill all the prompts for that game, which you guys are doing really well. I'll put the board up here so you can see how you're doing, and I'll put the board up of how I'm doing. I think at the moment I've fulfilled 3 of the prompts. You guys have fulfilled at least 5. You might have got the 6th by the time I put the board up, I'm not sure. But yeah, I've got some stuff that I want to read for that, which I talk about in that video that I'll post down in the description. So the very last thing I'm going to tell you about is my buddy read that I'm doing in February, and I'm doing it with Manny from Reading with Manny, and also Liana as well. We're reading Imago by Octavia E. Butler, which is the 3rd book in the Lilith's Brood novels series trilogy. And I'm really excited to get to this one because I absolutely loved, well, I really liked the first one. The second one I absolutely loved, so I'm really, really looking forward to this. And yeah, the covers of these editions that I've got are really stunning, so I'm really happy about that. So yeah, we're going to slowly read this throughout February and discuss it. And this is also on my 40 by 40, so hopefully I will knock out quite a few 40 by 40s in February. Fingers crossed. They're not so big, the ones that I've chosen, so hopefully it can happen. Although that does mean I'm leaving all the massive books on my list for obviously to rush through before my 40th birthday. But I've got a while. I'm not going to be 40 yet, so it's okay. Cool, so that's everything. I'd love to know what you guys are reading in the month of February, and if you're taking part in any of the read-alongs, readathons that I'm taking part in, I'd love to know that too. Anyway, I've talked for a long, long time in this video, so I hope it's not too long, but yeah. If it is, thank you so much for staying to the end. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I will chat to you guys in the comments. See you soon. Bye.